The October wind howled across the Wyoming territory like a banshee, driving sheets of rain against the weathered walls of the Rockingham Ranch. Inside the barn, cattle rancher Marcus Stone worked by lamplight, checking on his prize mare who was dutiful any day. The storm had been raging for 3 days straight, and he was running low on hay for the livestock. As he climbed the ladder to the hayloft, pitchfork in hand, Marcus never expected to find anything more than the sweet-smelling, dried grass he'd stored there in late summer. So when his boot struck something soft that definitely wasn't hay, he nearly lost his footing on the wooden rungs. "What the hell?" he muttered, holding his lantern higher. Huddled in the corner of the loft, wrapped in a tattered blanket and shivering violently, was a young woman. Her long auburn hair was matted with hay and dirt, her dress torn and mud-stained. But it was her eyes that stopped Marcus, cold green as spring grass and filled with a terror so profound it made his chest tighten with sympathy. "Please," she whispered, pressing herself deeper into the corner. "Please don't tell them you found me. They think I'm dead. They have to keep thinking I'm dead." Marcus set down his lantern and pitchfork, moving slowly so as not to frighten her further. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23, with delicate features that spoke of good breeding despite her current bedraggled state. There was something familiar about her face, though he couldn't place where he might have seen her before. "Easy there," he said in the same gentle tone he used with spooked horses. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name's Marcus Stone. This is my ranch." The woman studied his face in the lamplight, searching for some sign of deception. Marcus was a large man, standing well over 6 feet with broad shoulders built from years of ranch work. But his brown eyes held only kindness and concern. "I know who you are," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're the rancher who lives alone up here. People in town say you keep to yourself." "That they do," Marcus agreed. "And right now, I'm wondering how you came to be in my hayloft in the middle of the worst storm we've had all year." Fresh tears spilled down the woman's dirt-stained cheeks. "I've been hiding here for days. I'm sorry. I know I'm trespassing. I had nowhere else to go." Marcus's heart clenched at the desperation in her voice. Whatever had driven this young woman to take refuge in his barn during a storm was serious indeed. "What's your name?" She hesitated, as if even that simple question posed a danger. "Lily," she said finally. "Lily Ashford." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Lily Ashford, the banker's daughter from Cedar Falls. He'd seen her picture in the newspaper just last week, accompanying the story of her tragic death in a carriage accident. The whole territory had mourned the loss of such a young, beautiful woman. Her funeral had been one of the largest Cedar Falls had ever seen. "Lily Ashford is dead," Marcus said carefully, watching her reaction. "Died in a carriage accident 6 days ago. I read about it in the paper. That's what they want everyone to believe." Lily replied bitterly. "My own family staged my death to save themselves from scandal." Marcus lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the hay-covered floor, maintaining what he hoped was a non-threatening distance. "What kind of scandal?" Lily wrapped the blanket tighter around herself, her body still trembling from cold and fear. "I discovered something I wasn't supposed to. My father, my brother William, they've been stealing money from the bank, thousands of dollars over the past 2 years. When I confronted them about it, when I threatened to go to the authorities," she broke off, unable to continue. Marcus could see the pain and betrayal written clearly on her face. "They decided you were too dangerous to live," he finished grimly. Lily nodded, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "They made it look like an accident. Sent our carriage over the bridge into Willow Creek during the storm last week. Only I wasn't in it. They drugged me and hidden me in the wine cellar. They put one of our kitchen maids in the carriage instead, dressed in my clothes." Marcus felt sick to his stomach. He'd known Charles Ashford for years. The man was a pillar of the community, respected and trusted by everyone in Cedar Falls. To learn that he was not only a thief but capable of murdering his own daughter was almost beyond comprehension. "Dear God," he breathed. "What happened to the maid, Sarah Murphy?" She was 19 years old and had a sweetheart she planned to marry. Lily's voice broke completely. "She died because she looked enough like me in the dark to fool anyone who might investigate the accident. They killed an innocent girl just to cover their crimes. The horror of it settled over Marcus like a lead blanket. An entire family's evil laid bare theft, murder, and the ultimate betrayal of staging their own daughter's death, rather than face the consequences of their actions. "How did you escape?" he asked. "The storm," Lily explained. Wiping her nose on the blanket, it knocked out the lock on the cellar door. "I managed to get free while they were at my own funeral, accepting condolences and playing the part of grieving family members. I've been running ever since, staying off the roads, sleeping in barns and abandoned buildings." Marcus studied her, face in the lamplight, seeing not just the fear and exhaustion, but also a core of steel that had kept her alive. Through unimaginable circumstances, she'd lost everything: her family, her identity, even her legal existence, but she was still fighting. "Why didn't you go to the sheriff?" he asked. Lily laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Crawford has been in my father's pocket for years. Half the town. Officials owe the bank money. They'd never believe me over Charles Ashford, even if I could prove who I am. And besides, officially I don't exist anymore. I'm supposed to be dead and buried." Marcus understood her dilemma. In a small town like Cedar Falls, the banker wielded enormous influence. Without concrete proof of the crimes, Lily's word alone would never be enough, especially when she was supposed to be dead. "You can't keep living like this," he said gently. "Hiding in barns, running from shadows. You'll freeze to death once winter sets in proper." "I know," Lily whispered. "But what choice do I have? If they find me alive, they'll finish what they started. And next time, they'll make sure there's no chance of escape." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking. He lived alone on his ranch, 20 miles from the nearest neighbor. It was isolated enough that someone could stay hidden indefinitely, if necessary. And something about this young woman's plight called to the protective instincts he'd thought long buried. "Come down to the house," he said finally. "Get warm, get fed, get cleaned up. We'll figure out what to do next." Lily shook her head frantically. "I can't. What if someone sees me? What if they come looking?" "Nobody comes up here," Marcus assured her. "Haven't had a visitor in months, and right now, you're going to die of exposure if you stay in this barn much longer." He was right, and Lily knew it. She'd already pushed her body to its limits, and the October nights were getting dangerously cold. But the thought of trusting another person, after her own family had betrayed her so completely, terrified her almost as much as the idea of being discovered. Marcus seemed to understand her hesitation. "I know you have no reason to trust me," he said quietly, "after what your family did. I can't imagine how hard it must be to rely on anyone. But I give you my word I won't hurt you, and I won't turn you over to anyone who would." There was something in his voice, a quiet sincerity that penetrated Lily's walls of fear and suspicion. She'd been alone for 6 days, running on nothing but terror and determination. The offer of warmth, food, and safety, even temporary safety, was more tempting than gold. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Marcus considered the question, staring out the loft window at the storm-lashed landscape. "Maybe because I know what it's like to be alone in the world," he said finally. "And maybe because some things are just right, regardless of the risk." Lily studied his face, searching for some sign of deception or hidden motive. But all she saw was a lonely man offering kindness to someone who desperately needed it. It wasn't much to build trust on, but it was more than she'd had since this nightmare began. "All right," she whispered, "just for tonight, just until the storm passes." Marcus nodded and began gathering up his tools. "Fair enough. We'll take it one day at a time." As he helped her down from the loft, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change. Again, but this time, perhaps for the better. The lonely rancher had found her hiding in his hayloft, and for the first time since her world collapsed, she didn't feel quite so alone. The ghost was about to come back to life. The warmth of Marcus Stone's ranch house enveloped Lily like a gentle embrace. After days of cold terror, the main room was masculine but comfortable, with sturdy furniture and a stone fireplace that crackled with welcoming flames. It was the kind of home that spoke of solitude, but not loneliness. A place where a man could find peace with his own thoughts. "Sit by the fire," Marcus instructed, hanging his wet coat on a peg by the door. I'll get some coffee started and see what I can rustle up for supper. Lily sank into a chair near the hearth, still wrapped in the tattered blanket from the barn. The heat from the flames made her realize just how cold she'd been, and she began to shiver more violently as her body tried to warm itself. It had been so long since she'd felt truly warm that she'd almost forgotten what it was like. "Here," Marcus said, draping a thick quilt around her shoulders. "This should help." The simple kindness of the gesture brought fresh tears to Lily's eyes. After days of hiding and running, of seeing enemies in every shadow, the basic human compassion was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered. Clutching the quilt around herself, Marcus moved efficiently around his kitchen, starting coffee and pulling ingredients from his pantry. Lily watched him work, noting the economical movements of a man accustomed to taking care of himself. He was probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar and strong hands that handled even delicate tasks with surprising gentleness. "How long have you lived here alone?" she asked, needing conversation to keep the darker thoughts at bay. "5 years," Marcus replied, slicing bread and checking the soup he'd put on to heat. "Bought the land from a prospector who decided Montana gold was more appealing than Wyoming cattle. Built most of the buildings myself. No family?" Marcus's hands stilled for just a moment before resuming their work. "Had a wife once, Rebecca. She died in childbirth 3 years ago, along with our son." The pain in his voice was carefully controlled, but unmistakable. Lily felt her heart clench with sympathy for this man who'd already shown her more kindness than her own family. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That must have been devastating." "It was," Marcus admitted, ladling soup into a bowl. "Thought for a while about selling the ranch, starting over somewhere else. But this place, it's all I have left of the life we planned together. Couldn't bring myself to abandon it." He brought her the soup and bread, along with a cup of hot coffee that smelled like heaven. Lily realized she hadn't eaten a proper meal since her escape, surviving on apples stolen from orchards and water from streams. "Eat slowly," Marcus warned, settling into the chair across from her. "Your stomach won't handle too much at first." Lily forced herself to take small spoonfuls, though every instinct screamed at her to devour the entire bowl as quickly as possible. The soup was simple but well made, warming her from the inside out. "Tell me about your family," Marcus said gently. "Before all this happened, what were they like?" Lily set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly diminished. "I thought I knew them," she said bitterly. "Father was always stern but fair, or so I believed. William was my older brother. He was supposed to inherit the bank, carry on the family tradition. Mother died when I was 12. So it was just the 3 of us." "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" 3 months ago, Lily replied, staring into the fire. "I was looking for Father in his study when I found documents that didn't make sense. Loan approvals for amounts that didn't match the bank's records. Money being transferred to accounts I'd never heard of." Marcus leaned forward, his expression intent. "What did you do?" "I confronted William first. Thought maybe there was an innocent explanation." Lily's laugh was hollow. "He tried to convince me I'd misunderstood what I'd seen. But I'm not stupid. I can read financial records as well as any man. I've been helping with the bank's books since I was 16. So, you went to your father." "The biggest mistake of my life," Lily said quietly. "I thought he'd be shocked, that he'd want to help me get to the bottom of it. Instead, he flew into a rage. Started asking how long I'd been spying on him, whether I'd told anyone else what I'd discovered." Marcus felt his jaw tighten with anger. What kind of father turned on his own daughter for trying to prevent criminal activity? "That's when I realized they were in it together," Lily continued. "The whole time I'd been helping with the books. They'd been stealing from their own customers, farmers who'd trusted them with their life savings, widows who'd deposited their husband's insurance money, young couples saving to buy their first homes. How much money are we talking about? At least $15,000, maybe more, enough to ruin dozens of families if the truth came out." Lily wrapped her arms around herself, still feeling the chill of that terrible realization. "I told them I was going to the territorial authorities, that I couldn't be part of covering up something so wrong, and that's when they decided you had to die." Lily nodded. fresh tears streaming down her face. My own father looked me in the eye and told me I'd brought it on myself. Said if I'd minded my own business like a proper daughter should, none of this would be necessary. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, not just at the crimes themselves, but at the casual cruelty of a father willing to murder his own child to protect his stolen wealth. It was evil of a depth he'd rarely encountered. The worst part, Lily whispered, is that I keep thinking about Sarah Murphy. She was so excited about her wedding next spring. She'd show me her hope chest every time I visited the kitchen, telling me about the linens she was embroidering and the dishes she was saving money to buy. She died because she happened to be the right height and build to pass for me in erect carriage. That's not your fault, Marcus said firmly. You didn't choose for them to use her as a substitute. That was their decision, their crime. I know that in my head, Lily replied. But my heart keeps asking if there was something I could have done differently. Some way I could have stopped all of this before it went so far. Marcus studied her face in the firelight, seeing the guilt and self-recrimination that was eating her alive. He recognized the look he'd seen it in his own mirror often enough after Rebecca's death, wondering if he could have somehow prevented the complications that claimed both his wife and son. Guilt's a poison, he said quietly. I learned that the hard way. You can let it consume you, or you can choose to honor the dead by making sure their sacrifice wasn't meaningless. What do you mean? I mean you're still alive, Lily. You escaped their trap. You know the truth about their crimes, and you're the only one who can make sure they face justice for what they've done. Not just to you, but to Sarah Murphy and all the people they've stolen from. Lily shook her head in frustration. But how? I'm officially dead. I have no legal standing. No proof that would hold up in court. It's my word against two of the most respected men in Cedar Falls. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, turning the problem over in his mind. Finally, he looked up at her with something that might have been the beginning of a plan. What if you weren't alone? He asked. What if you had help gathering evidence, building a case that even Sheriff Crawford couldn't ignore? You're talking about involving yourself in something that could get you killed, Lily said, her eyes wide with alarm. These men have already committed murder to protect their secret. They wouldn't hesitate to kill anyone who threatened to expose them. Maybe not, Marcus agreed. But I've got advantages they don't know about. I'm not part of their social circle, don't owe the bank money, and most people barely know I exist. I could investigate without arousing suspicion. Why would you take such a risk for me? You've already done more than enough by giving me shelter. Marcus considered how to explain the complex mix of emotions driving his offer. Partly, it was simple, justice, the need to see criminals punished for their crimes. Partly, it was sympathy for a young woman who'd lost everything through no fault of her own. But if he was honest, there was something else, something he'd thought died with Rebecca. Because, he said finally, for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I have a reason to fight for something again. And because you deserve better than spending the rest of your life as a ghost. Lily stared at him across the flickering firelight, seeing not just offer of help but something deeper, a man emerging from his own grief to offer hope to someone who desperately needed it. It would be dangerous, she warned. If they discovered what we were doing, then we'll have to make sure they don't discover it, Marcus replied with a slight smile. I may live alone, but I'm not defenseless, and I know this territory better than any banker or his hired guns. You're serious about this, dead serious, but only if you want to fight back. If you'd rather stay hidden, wait for them to give up looking. I respect that choice too. Lily looked into the fire, weighing her options. She could remain dead, spend the rest of her life in hiding, always looking over her shoulder. Or she could trust this lonely rancher and fight to reclaim not just her life, but justice for Sarah Murphy and all the others her family had wronged. When she looked back at Marcus, her green eyes blazed with determination. All right, she said firmly, let's bring some ghosts back to life. 3 weeks later, Marcus Stone rode into Cedar Falls with saddlebags full of evidence that would shake the small town to its foundations. Hidden in his coat pocket was a small leather journal containing detailed records of every fraudulent transaction Charles and William Ashford had conducted over the past 2 years. The journal had been painstakingly compiled by Lily, working from memory and the documents Marcus had carefully photographed. During his visits to the bank, the plan had been elegant in its simplicity. Marcus had approached Charles Ashford about financing an expansion of his ranch, providing a legitimate reason for multiple visits to examine loan documents and banking procedures, while Ashford and his son focused on the potential profit from a large loan. Marcus had systematically documented their criminal enterprise. What they'd discovered was worse than even Lily had suspected. The Ashfords hadn't just been skimming money from customer accounts. They'd been running an elaborate scheme involving fake loans, inflated property values, and partnerships with corrupt land speculators throughout the territory. The $15,000 Lily had uncovered was merely the tip of a much larger criminal operation. But the most damaging evidence had come from an unexpected source, Samuel Morrison, the telegraph operator, who'd grown suspicious of the unusual number of coded messages passing between Cedar Falls and certain business associates in Denver and Cheyenne. Morrison had kept copies of the telegrams, and when Marcus approached him privately, the operator had been more than willing to share his concerns about the Ashfords' activities. Now, as Marcus tied his horse outside the territorial marshal's office, he felt the weight of justice finally within reach. Marshal James Crawford, no relation to the corrupt local sheriff, had arrived in Cedar Falls that morning in response to Marcus's carefully worded telegram, requesting an investigation into financial irregularities at the First National Bank. Mr. Stone, Marshal Crawford greeted him as Marcus entered the office. He was a lean man in his 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "I understand you have some serious allegations to make." "That I do, Marshal," Marcus replied, settling into the offered chair, "and I have the evidence to back them up." For the next 2 hours, Marcus laid out the case against Charles and William Ashford with methodical precision. The marshal's expression grew increasingly grim as the scope of the crimes became clear. When Marcus presented the journal and the copied telegrams, Crawford whistled low under his breath. "This is enough to put both of them away for life," the marshal said finally. "But I have to ask, how did you come by some of this information, these account records? For instance, they're too detailed for someone to have compiled from casual observation." Marcus had been prepared for this question. "I had help from someone with intimate knowledge of the bank's operations, someone who'd been systematically deceived by the Ashfords and wanted to see justice done." "Does someone have a name?" "They prefer to remain anonymous for now," Marcus replied carefully. "Given the nature of the crimes and the fact that at least one person has already died, to protect these secrets, I'm sure you understand their caution." Marshal Crawford nodded slowly. "I do indeed." "Very well, I'll take your evidence under consideration. But I want you to know, Mr. Stone, that if this information proves accurate, you've uncovered one of the largest financial crimes in territorial history." "I believe that's exactly what we've done, Marshal." "We'll need sworn testimony from your anonymous source eventually," Crawford warned. "But for now, this is enough to justify arrests and a full investigation." That evening, as the sun set over the Wyoming territory, Charles and William Ashford were taken into custody on charges of bank fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The news spread through Cedar Falls like wildfire, leaving the community reeling from the revelation that their most trusted citizens were criminals of the worst sort. But Marcus wasn't in town to witness the arrests. He was already riding hard for his ranch, where Lily waited with a mixture of hope and terror for news of whether their plan had succeeded. He found her pacing in front of the fireplace, still wearing the men's clothing they'd decided was safer than dresses that might be recognized. She spun around as he entered, her green eyes wide with anxiety. "Well," she asked breathlessly. "Marshal Crawford has issued warrants," Marcus said, pulling her into his arms as relief flooded through both of them. "Your father and brother are in custody. It's over, Lily, it's finally over." She collapsed against his chest, her body shaking, with sobs that combined grief, relief, and exhaustion. For 3 weeks, they'd worked tirelessly to build their case, knowing that failure would likely mean death for both of them. The strain had been enormous, but it had also brought them closer, together in ways neither had expected. "What happens now?" Lily asked when she could speak again. Now we bring you back from the dead," Marcus said, stroking her hair gently. "Marshal Crawford will need your testimony, which means revealing that you're alive. There'll be a lot of questions, a lot of attention." "I'm ready for that," Lily said firmly. "I want people to know what really happened to Sarah Murphy. I want her family to know she died because she was brave enough to work for people she thought she could trust." Over the following weeks, Lily Ashford's return from the dead became the story that dominated newspapers throughout the territory. The revelation that she'd been forced to fake her own death to escape her murderous family captured the public imagination, while the scope of the Ashfords' criminal enterprise shocked even seasoned lawmen. Charles and William Ashford were eventually sentenced to life in prison, though Charles died of a heart attack before he could begin serving his term. The bank's assets were placed in territorial receivership, and a fund was established to compensate the victims of the fraud. Sarah Murphy was given a proper burial with full honors, and a scholarship was established in her name for young women seeking education. Her fiancé, devastated by the truth of her death, eventually found comfort in knowing that her sacrifice had helped bring down a criminal empire. But for Lily, the most important change was personal. As the legal proceedings concluded and she slowly rebuilt her life, she found herself increasingly unwilling to imagine a future that didn't include Marcus Stone. "I've been thinking," she said one evening as they sat together on his front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. "Dangerous habit," Marcus replied with the gentle humor that had become so precious to her. "I'm serious," Lily laughed, swatting at his arm. "I've been offered a position with the Territorial Banking Commission. They want me to help reform banking practices throughout Wyoming and Montana." Marcus felt his heart sink. "That's wonderful, Lily. You'd be perfect for that kind of work. It would mean traveling extensively, being away from here for months at a time." "I understand," Marcus said quietly, though understanding and accepting were two different things entirely. "No, I don't think you do," Lily said, turning to face him fully. "I'm telling you about the offer because I want you to know I'm choosing not to take it." Marcus stared at her in surprise. "Why would you turn down an opportunity like that?" "Because I've already found what I was looking for," Lily said simply. "A place where I'm valued for who I am, not what I can provide. A home where I feel safe and loved. A man who risked everything to help me find justice." "Lily, I love you, Marcus Stone," she said firmly. "I love your quiet strength, your unwavering sense of right and wrong, your gentle heart that's big enough to love someone else even after losing so much. If you'll have me, I'd like to stay right here and build a life with you." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Are you sure? You've been through so much trauma, so much change. How do you know what you're feeling is real and not just gratitude?" "Because," Lily said, reaching for his hands, "gratitude doesn't make my heart race when you walk into a room. Gratitude doesn't make me dream about gray-haired children playing in that meadow behind the barn. Gratitude doesn't make me want to spend every morning for the rest of my life waking up next to you." Marcus pulled her into his arms then, kissing her with all the passion and tenderness he'd been holding back for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "Is that a yes?" Lily asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "That's a yes," Marcus confirmed. "Though I should warn you, life on a ranch isn't easy. Long hours, hard work, isolation. I've been dead for the better part of 2 months," Lily pointed out. "I think I can handle a little hard work." 6 months later, Lily Ashford became Lily Stone in a ceremony attended by half the territory. Marshal Crawford gave her away. Samuel Morrison served as Marcus's best man, and Sarah Murphy's mother wept happy tears as she told everyone who would listen that Sarah would have loved seeing justice and love triumph together. The lonely rancher had found his ghost in the hayloft, but he'd gained so much more than that. He'd found a partner, a best friend, and a love that proved some things were worth fighting for. And in the years that followed, as their children played in the meadow behind the barn and their love deepened with each passing season, Marcus and Lily never forgot the lesson their story had taught them. Sometimes the greatest treasure is found in the most unexpected places. And sometimes the best way to heal from the past is to build something beautiful for the future. The ghost had indeed come back to life, and she'd brought love with her.